Today, as we finish the second chapter in First Chronicles, we're going to see some cultural shifts. And we're going to ask ourselves the question, why was this so important for the chronicler to record this subtle shift? We're titled this particular video as From Regions to Cities to People Groups. And we'll talk about that when we come back. Hi, and welcome to Bible Study with Friends, where our goal is to help you get more impact from your Bible study. How to study the Bible, how to mark it, and how to apply it into your lives. I'm here with my friend Kyle Grinstead, and Kyle and I are going to continue our study in the book of First Chronicles. And we're in this kind of interesting and difficult section of the first 9 chapters, which goes from Adam all the way through to when Cyrus is the king of Babylon and is about to release the people. And we've talked about that, how this is being written at the end of that 70-year captivity in Babylon and then in Persia. And it's being written for the Jews to reorient themselves and to get a good picture of the line of Messiah and the line of the priest.
Yep.
We're going to see some interesting things today, just in trends when you're looking at some of these sections of just name after name, how to make some observations. So we'll do that today. Let's get into it right away. We're going to start at chapter 2, verse 42, and we're going to go to the end of the chapter. Now, this relates back up to still the descendants of Hezron. And remember, we started that back up in chapter 2, verse 18 and 19. It talked about Hezron and Hezron's kids. And one son was Jamil, and another son was Caleb. And so now, after 40 verses or so, it's picking back up with the sons of Caleb. So this is referring back to one of the children of Hezron. Okay,
right.
that tracking so far?
It is, yep.
All right. And he identifies that. He says, this is Caleb. This isn't a nephew or something. This is actually Caleb, who was Jerahmeel's brother. And it says his sons were Misha, the firstborn, who was the father of Ziph, and his son Marishah, the father of Hebron. The sons of Hebron were Korah, Tepu, and Rechem, and Shema. Now, I circled that verse because we start to see an interesting, I won't say a trend, but an interesting shift in the focus of the genealogies.
Okay.
Now, you remember in chapter 2, it named the children of Israel, the children of Jacob. And there were 12 children of Jacob that became 12 regions in the Middle East. Judah, and it became a region. Manasseh was a region. Benjamin was a region.
Yep.
So we had this trend where a family became the dominant name for an entire region. And then we saw that started to shift into nations.
Okay.
These regions became a national identity. Now here we see a shift in this verse. Let's go back to this. We're seeing a first-time shift in the genealogies, and that is with the sons of Caleb. The son of Caleb was Misha, and Misha was the father of Ziph and his children, and the sons of Hebron, which is a son of Ziph, were in these names, right? Now, we can, if we stop and say, the only familiar name here might be Hebron, and the other familiar name is Korah. Those are place names that are going to become well known a little bit later in the story of Israel.
Okay.
But I did a little quick study. And if we go over here, all of these sons that are named founded cities. Now, we're not going to turn there and see these, but in Joshua 15, 24 and 26, and in Joshua 15, 34 and 44 and 54, and in Joshua 18, 27, we start to see mentions of all of these names as the name of cities.
Okay.
Okay. So there's a shift. We're going from family regions to cities within regions, right?
Yeah. So the scope is narrowing.
Now, why do you think First Chronicles would make that shift? We talked about the importance of the line of Messiah, especially through Judah, where all the sons of Jacob, and they really focus on Judah and Benjamin. And all of a sudden now we're starting to see through Hezron, who is in the direct line of Messiah, we're starting to see his sons and grandsons as founders of cities. Now, why would that occur to you in Chronicles to be a good thing? Why is that there?
Is it at all related to the promised land, that God's promised that the people would settle and create cities in the promised land?
Okay. And what is First Chronicles is written when?
At the time of the exile,
Okay.
or
And
coming back from the exile?
How long had the exile been?
70 years.
70 years. And now all of a sudden, Israel is being released to go back to the homeland, right? Back to Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. But they've been gone for 70 years.
Yeah.
Think about that. That would take us back into what would that be?
50s?
40s and 50s. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago. So all of a sudden, we're having people that have been in Babylon for 70 years, and they're going to be moving back to the homeland. What he's doing here is he is giving them cities that they can relate to as a connection to the homeland.
Okay.
Because they haven't had a connection for 70 years.
Yeah.
Now they're going to be moving back and they're going to say, oh, okay. So when you come to the city of Ziph or the city of Hebron, these famous ones that are mentioned in Joshua, where Joshua is bringing them back into the land in the first place, these are places where the Jews coming out of the captivity can relate and connect to the land.
Okay.
That makes sense?
So it gives them a sense of ownership of coming back.
Yeah, a lot more than just this whole area is the region of Judah. Okay, fine. But I'm going to live in towns and cities.
Yeah.
And how do I know where to live? How do I know it's a good place to live? Because the Samaritans, and they have been a bunch of people in the land for 70 years. Mm-hmm. So how do I know I'm going to move to a town that's a good Jewish connection, right?
Yep.
So he starts to do that. He starts this idea of, let's go back here, and we see these cities. They're all mentioned here in verse 42 and 43 as founders of cities. Now, it keeps up this tradition of Shema had a son, and the father of Raham had a son, and he was the father of Jorkeam. I always want to say Jorkeam, but he wasn't a jerk. He was okay. And then Rechem down here became the father. So again, like the trend that we've seen is they go one generation deep. Why? Because these specifics out of 5, 6 sons, they'll go one generation deep on one or two of them, because this is the descendant of Hezron, who's in the direct line of Messiah. These are Hezron's connections to connections that are going to lead to chapter 3, the line of David.
Okay.
And the line of David reestablishing the kingdom of David in the land. So this last part of chapter 2 is really reconnecting the people with various cities in the land
Yeah.
that they really haven't had a connection to for 70 years.
Yep.
Make sense?
It does.
So we get a feel for what the chronicler is doing, whether he's Ezra or somebody else, but he's trying to give the people not only the line of whose tribe are you in and whose family are you in, but also what region do you belong to and what towns within those regions do you have connections with.
Yeah.
So we see that in these verses. And we're going to watch the trends here because there's some interesting things that happen. In 46 through 50, we get some women mentioned, and they all have something in common. They're all concubines of Caleb. So Caleb had his wives, and he had concubines. And those concubines produced children who are half brothers with the sons of Hezron.
Okay.
And
just
and
for
the other sons of Caleb.
Okay.
These
Just
are
for
half,
context here, is this Caleb the same one who we read about in Joshua, who he wanted to
No.
spy the different Caleb?
No, yeah, different Caleb.
Okay.
Yeah. So we see here that these women, Ephah, Macha, and then another woman is mentioned, Asha, and she is not a concubine. She is the daughter of Caleb. So he had a bunch of sons and then a daughter, right? And then verse 50 says, these were the sons of Caleb. So from verse 42 down to 50 is all the sons of Caleb through either wives or concubines.
Okay.
Now that tells you some problems that Ezra faced when they were coming out of the captivity. And he started to say, you know, you need to come and you need to identify with the tribe. All of a sudden, you had Jews who had a good line, and they had produced children from, in some cases, Gentiles, in some cases, pagans.
Yeah.
Who had become not wives, but concubines. So we're seeing some introduction to the messianic line. Now remember that Jesus has Gentiles in his lineage, in his direct lineage. So here we start to see this moving from the 12 sons into grandsons that start to mix with Gentiles. Okay? All right, let's go back. I want to notice one other thing that may come up in your studies. There is somebody mentioned here in verse 47. The sons of Jadai were, and it names them. And then it doesn't talk about any of the children of these kids, right? It just stops there. And I have a question mark because Jadai is not mentioned anywhere else in the Bible.
Wow. Okay.
And it's weird because you go, well, wait a minute. The sons of Jadai is not a descendant of Caleb. He's not a descendant of one of Caleb's kids. All of a sudden, it just says the sons of Jadai. Now, I did a little research and found out that one of the commentators said that, oh, Jadai was probably a concubine.
Okay.
So the son of Jadai would be the son of Jadai, one of Caleb's concubines, like the other concubines mentioned in the verse right before and the verse right after.
Okay.
But there's a problem
That makes
with
sense.
that, and that is Jadai is a masculine name. It's not feminine. So we literally do not have a clue who Jadai was and why he's mentioned in this line. And the fact that he's mentioned, his kids are mentioned, but that's it. No further generations. So we literally don't know. And the only thing we can think of is that the Jews would have known who he was.
Yeah. Wow.
Because it very matter of factly says, and the sons of Jadai were so and so. It doesn't say Jadai, the concubine of Caleb. It just bang, he's there and then he's gone. I just thought that was an interesting thing that there are a number of times in the book of Chronicles, First Chronicles especially, that lineages are mentioned that are mentioned nowhere else in the scripture.
Yeah.
And it's like the writer of Chronicles, whoever he is just trying to connect some dots. It just seems.
Okay. You think would Jotham, isn't Jotham a king? Would that be a different Jotham?
I don't know. I don't know from the aspect of Chronicles doesn't go into and the son of Jotham was, or Jotham the king of. It does. There's no footnotes. There's nothing about this family of Jaddai. So literally, it's a mystery. It's a Bible mystery. Someday we may have an archaeological connection or something, but right now, nobody knows who Jaddai was. None of the commentaries, none of the scholars have a clue. And the only guy that made a guess, I think, is a dumb one because Jaddai is the masculine form.
Yeah.
And you don't have women with masculine names. Okay. Now, I want to show you something else interesting. We start to see these concubines of Caleb, and then verse 50, these were the sons of Caleb. And then you go, the sons of Caleb back there. Now, then the sons of Hur. Now, who's Hur? Go back up to 19, verse 19.
Okay. It says, when Azubah died, Caleb married Ephrath, who bore to him Hur.
Okay. So now the sons of Caleb were above 50. Now we're going to talk about the sons of one of his sons.
Okay.
And you go, it's strange to jump back, but that's what Chronicles does. He goes, the sons of Hur, the firstborn of. Now, if you go back into 19 and those verses right there, you find out that the mother of Hur was Ephrath, and later her name, they add an AH to it. Now, we don't know why, but that's who this is.
Got it.
So she is the mother of Hur. Now you go, so what? Okay, let's go on. And Hur produces with Ephrathah were Shobal, the father of another, Salma, who was the father of who?
Bethlehem.
Okay, now this is the Bethlehem. This is that continuing that thing of where they're starting to make cities. And if you go into Ruth chapter 4 and Micah chapter 5, it's very interesting. When Bethlehem is mentioned, it is mentioned hyphenated with her name. Okay.
Ephrathah?
Yeah, I can't pronounce it well, but you did a good job there. And it's Ephrathah dash Bethlehem.
Okay.
So the woman who produces the father, who produces the son named Bethlehem, who founds the city of Bethlehem. Now, what is the significance of the city of Bethlehem?
Where Jesus was born.
Who else?
David?
Yeah, because remember, why was Jesus born in Bethlehem? Because Bethlehem was a city of David that David came from, and that they had to go there for the census.
Okay.
So Bethlehem is this town in the lineage of Messiah. And this traces where that town got its name was from this kid named Bethlehem, and he was produced by her with Ephrathah.
So it's his grandma? Ephrathah is Bethlehem's grandma?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It says Ephrathah produces Shema, and Shema produces Bethlehem. Okay. And we see that there. So here, all of a sudden, back in this trend, we saw a city named that was a child. Let me refocus this a little bit. There we go. That's a little bit better. Okay, we have Salma produces Bethlehem, who is a city. So we have these city names, right? The birthplace of Messiah, the birthplace of David. And then it goes, again, another generation. Salma is mentioned down here. But I want you to notice verse 52 and 53. We're not going to read it. But if you notice a shift again, just in the Shebel was the father of Kirath Jearim, and he had sons, and the sons are made here. Now, notice in 52, Haroah, half of the Manhattanites.
That's what I thought too.
They lived in Manhattan. No, but if you notice the ites.
Yeah, a lot of
And
ites.
53 says, and the families of him, the ites, and the ites. Okay. That in 53.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Now, what's the shift? So we went from tribal names to regions to cities, and now where are we?
Back to tribal names.
No.
Right? Or
no, now it's not just the people of that guy, but it's all the people who live there. So this is now a people group.
Okay.
First Chronicles stops naming families and sons of sons and starts naming the fathers of a people group, the ites. Okay. The termites and the parasites and all the sites. You see what I'm saying? And you see that shift. So in this chapter from 42 on, you see this move in the chronicler's connection of the people to the land. He's moving from the tribal names of the 12 sons to these regional names, to city names, now to people groups around those cities. Okay.
All right.
So he's saying, even if you can't move into a city, you can live in a region that has a whole bunch of people that are all related to you through this genealogy.
Okay.
So it's all of these trends that we see at the end of chapter 2 leading up to chapter 3 are all just basically the chronicler is connecting them to the land. So you got all these ites and no more sons. If you notice the families, no more the son of so on, but now it's talking about the families are the ites, and no more sons are mentioned. There's no more sons until down here where it's a direct connection again with Bethlehem, because it's back into that. But then it says his sons were Bethlehem and not a town, not a region, not even a person, but a knights. And half of the Mennonites and I want to say Mennonites so bad, but the Zerites are all mentioned here. So it's a real move away from city names.
Yeah.
Away from the tribes. And all of a sudden the genealogies are no longer tracking sons of, but are tracking whole peoples of.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the last verse in chapter 2, look at that verse. And what do you notice about that verse? Let's look at it together.
Okay.
Verse 55.
That's the first time an occupation is mentioned, or at least I think so.
Yep.
Families of scribes.
Okay. Now, is there any connection with the scribes and any children of anybody in the line?
I don't think so.
Yeah. You see, that it's very interesting. Remember that the purpose of Chronicles is we're tracing two lineages. Mm-hmm. We're tracing the lineage of the Messiah, and we're tracing the lineage of the priests. Now, he's doing that through the records of Israel, the genealogies, and he's writing down these records that are written in other places, but he's putting them all together as a place where they can refer. And all of a sudden, at the end of chapter 2, right before getting into chapter 3, the lineage of King David, he mentions the scribes and the fact that the scribes produced people groups.
Okay.
Now, why would scribes be important to First?
Probably he just, since he is the chronicler is a scribe, he just really likes the scribes. Just kidding.
Okay. I think he's emphasizing the fact that this whole genealogy is based on the records of Israel. And
Okay.
who writes the records of Israel? Scribes. So he's connecting the record keepers with this region of people, this groups of people, because they produce these ites, right?
Yeah.
And he's saying, so the record keepers of Israel have a place and an importance in the genealogies, because without the record keepers, without the scribes, you couldn't trace your family. You couldn't trace your region. You couldn't trace your people group.
Right.
So this is a kind of a nod to the record keepers as he's leaving these genealogies leading up to the king who created the United Kingdom and was ultimately the direct line of the kingdom of Messiah.
Yeah.
So this is just a nod at the end that's basically said everything up to this point wouldn't have been possible without those scribes. And they are an important part of the history of Israel because it's through them we know who we are.
Yeah. Which is really important.
So we see in the book this move from individual sons, the 12 sons of Israel, through to a tribe, and then to a geographic region, and then to cities within those regions, then to a people group of the kinds of people throughout the land
Yep.
that we're descendants of. And the direct genealogy stops where it's no longer son of, it's no, they produced the Hittites and the Jebusites and all these sites, which are groups of people that are remotely related into a people group. The same as we would in missions talk about unreached people groups. These were people groups within the lines of the Jews so that they could relate to the land when they got out of the 70 years of captivity.
Cool.
My takeaway is this is an interesting section of the chapter, but it also shows God's plan. God has a plan, and he's a God of details. And he's a God not only of details, but he's a God of people within those details. That he's interested in guys that show up and we don't know where they came from, who they are, what they did. We don't know anything, but God's got them listed in his word because God is a God of people, not just a God of laws and regulations and territories, but of people. And we'll end there.
All right.
Next week, we'll get into the line of David. That'll be interesting. Well, today we've been talking about these changes and the ability of Israel to be able to relate to the land they were going to retake by returning after the Babylonian captivity. I want to recommend a video to you along these lines. It's called Joseph Dealing with Family Issues. It's out of the book of Genesis, and I think you'll enjoy it along these lines of family issues. We'll continue in our study next week into chapter 3, the lineage of David. And until then, God bless you.